Welcome and good day to everybody. It's fantastic to see so many people here joining us, and a special welcome to Professor Lee and Professor Fan, who will join me in this session on stage here, or what we say in the virtual world. Professor Jian Li is the Michelin Chaired Professor of Family Enterprise at CEIBS in Shanghai. And Professor Joseph Fan is the Professor of Finance at Chinese University in Hong Kong, and both of them are maybe the two most knowledgeable professors in the world about family businesses, and definitely in the Asia context. So it's a great pleasure to have you both here. Let me just set the context, spend 2 minutes on that before we leave the floor to Professor Lee. We are talking about resilience today. We are talking about crisis. We are talking about family firms, and hopefully we also talk about opportunities coming out of crisis. Now, we are, as we all know, in a pandemic crisis. I mean, that is a multi-dimensional crisis in a level that none of us in our generation have met before. It has an economic dimension. As a family firm, as a firms, demand has changed. For many firms, demand has disappeared. It also affected our supply channels for our businesses. It certainly also has a strategy element, this crisis. And, all firm leaders, and particularly all family firm leaders, have been thinking about, what are the strategic responses to the crisis we are in now. Obviously, digitalization, online business has been major issues the last year. And it has a third dimension, which is, I call the organizational consequences. I mean, this is the first time in our generations that we get sick from going to work. I mean, if you have said this to me 1.5 years ago, nobody would have believed that, right? But all over the world, we are definitely thinking about, how can we protect employees? And this is big, in particular in family firms, but in all businesses. How can we organize work to be more resilient? The issue about homework, no traveling, no physical meetings, webinar on Zoom. These are all elements that maybe is not new, but has been implemented in a scale which has been unprecedented. The second thing I want to say is we're also talking about family firms, which means the next slide, please. And it's true. All research shows us that family firms tend to be more resilient on average, not all family firms, but on average, there is an issue about family firms being more resilient in crisis. And I think there are 4 key elements in this. A, many family firms are conservative on finance, so they are less leverage. Now, if you're in a crisis where cash is king, obviously being less leverage and having more access to finance is good. There's also this issue that many family firms are value-based, and the family has value that penetrates the business, and therefore, over time, build labor relations which may be different and maybe better than in non-family firms. And that can be a source of doing more resilient stuff in a crisis. There's the history. Old family businesses in particular, I've been the pleasure of working with the oldest family businesses in the world. These are century-old family businesses. I mean, they have been through crises before, and it gives you some mentality. We will hear from family businesses later today who are very old. And this idea that you have seen it before, that you don't want to close the shop, the legacy of your firm can be a big driver in resilience. And finally, there's the flexible leadership style illustrated below here. I mean, many family firms have less checks and balances. Some family firms are even a one-man band compared to this symphony orchestra of well-governed, big structured firms. And in crisis situations, this may be an advantage because if you want to change things, there's often a more faster way to do it. Finally, I would say we're also going to talk about opportunities today. Next slide, please. And this is really what I think many of us are thinking about. At least in some parts of the world, we hope to see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel, hoping to return to something which could be normal this year. And how do we change resilience, crisis, to opportunities. And, is this the, it also has this dimension of resilience across generations, which I think is also a big challenge at the moment. Are we waiting? Is this the time for the next generations? We will hear from the MBAs to step up and use the crisis to do something completely new. That is what I think for me are many of the key elements today. And I look very much forward both to hear my two colleagues now, but also to hear the family business owners coming later and the MBAs at the end. So with this, please welcome Professor Jian Li. I've known you at least for 10 years. You have been doing a fantastic job in CEIBS. Jian Li is probably one of the most knowledgeable people about mainland Chinese family businesses, and you definitely do some of the biggest family businesses conferences with hundreds, not thousands of family business owners at CEIBS every year. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Morten. I'm very glad to be here. Can someone allow me to turn on my video? I cannot start my video because the host has stopped it.
Yes, Jean, we're taking care of that. We'll allow you to join in by video.
All right.
Time you can share your slides, and then we'll put your video on.
Okay, let me.
Perfect. We see you, Jean.
Okay, can I share my slides? And can you see?
Yes, we can see them.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody online. I'm Jeannie from CEIBS. I'm actually in the quarantine hotel in Shanghai. So you see me in the little corner, but I'm very glad to be here to share some of my observations of the Chinese family business and how they respond to this pandemic crisis. Now, my observation is basically based on some my interaction with the peers advisory board that I have under my research center, the Center for Family Heritage in CEIBS. So this peers advisory board are actually formed by our alumni who are from family business, and majority of them are the second gen of family business. Now, just to highlight to you that in China, due to the historical background, majority of the family business is, we are talking about from generation 1 moving to generation 2, although there are family business who are in the 3rd or 4th generation, but majority, predominantly family business, we are talking about G1 to G2. And under my research center, we have this peers advisory board that are formed by the family members, and we meet quarterly. And the purpose is for them to share their practices with each other. And I serve as a coach, as a facilitator. And it's actually very interesting. Right now, it's about, each board, it's about 10 to 12 people. So now I'm running 4 boards, and it's actually a very good learning opportunity for me and to collect a lot of the qualitative data. Now, when the pandemic happened last year, I was actually in Singapore. So the first half of the year, January to June, I was in Singapore. And, we stopped our activities, but in July, when I started to reconnect with them, we had our first Zoom peer advisory board meeting. And it was the purpose of that meeting was to share some of the best practices they had during the pandemic crisis. And throughout the whole meeting, I was, it caught me a lot of surprises, and I'd like to share with you the 3 surprises that I've learned. On the business aspect, I was, thinking, maybe, this family business, in terms of their performance, it will be, dropping, not doing well. And but surprisingly, many of them told me that, oh, although our Q1, Q2, we are not doing very well, but now we are picking up fast. And so very action oriented and high adaptability to change. That's, what I gather from them. And most of them are in a very optimistic, positive tone. It's like, okay, this will be, something that we need to manage, but, we look at long term, and I think we are still positive. And so that spirit of optimism, it's what I get. Is so, and then also the long-term thinking. Many of the factories, may turn into making masks, making something else, but then they say that, we still stick to our family mission, and this is what we are doing, and although we do make changes in terms of our strategic focus, and we may use different approach to reach our goals, but in terms of their thinking, it's still long term. So that's caught me surprised that they were quite positive. Just to show you some figure, this is a survey that we did among our alumni in terms of the impact on the business operation in China. It's only certain industries that get bigger hits. And, some of these industries are actually okay, manageable. And even, in some industries like finance or IT or software or internet business, they are actually making a big jump, big growth. This is, and in terms of the measures they took to respond to pandemic. And so these are the top measures: switch to remote working, almost like 2/3, and negotiate and coordinate with business partners. So these are some of the measures they take quickly, it's like within first to second month. So many of them said that, during Chinese New Year, we were not having holiday. We are, into all this crisis management. Now, in terms of the HR practice, surprisingly, 66% say no layoff, no salary cut. Although some say salary cuts are at the executive level, or some say across the company. So, so it seems that, in terms of the business aspect, although there is this short-term drop, but, overall they are quite optimistic. Now, the second surprise I had was that because most of the board members are actually second gen, so they work together with their parents in the company. And I hear a lot of a positive tone. Because during the pandemic period, they feel that they could take some leadership role in managing the change. One of the things that they did was the digital transformation, something that the parents could not do well. So the second gen find their value. So these are some of the things that they introduced to the company. Some companies have done some of those, but it is not in full force. But during this pandemic period, this whole process of digitalization was expedited. And in terms of work, telecommuting, they have like a daily meeting. Employees have to clock in, clock out, every day. So it's like, you're going to work daily. And they have meetings, and they even have a lot of online courses, online training, and online marketing. So those are some of the things that the second gen introduced to the company. So, right. So in terms of digital transformation, the second gen plays a significant role. I like what Morten's PPT says, that the juniors turn out to be the change maker, which is very true in this Chinese family business. And also because during the pandemic time, in the past, I always hear that I have a lot of conflicts with my parents. They don't allow me to do this. They don't trust me in doing that. But, in the meeting last year, they started to feel that the parents actually have to allow them want to do more of this. So it gives them the opportunities to win trust from their parents, also to build their credibility with the employees. And one of the other things is that they even hire more new talents. You know, we thought that they would retrench and all that, but they thought that because they need to implement all this new transformation, and so they have to hire different types of talents to do the online sales, online marketing, online training. So so they recruit a lot of new talents. So I see that positive side. So you know, and after 1 year, like recently we had another board meeting. Many of this second gen said that they have been promoted or they are officially taking over some of the business. So this pandemic, this crisis has given the second gen some good opportunities to actually show their values to the company. So that's a succession aspect. It actually expedites the process of the transition. And I think the first generations also realize that, you know, it's going to be a different world and they need the children to support them in this aspect. Now, the third thing is that the third surprise, it's just, I see a lot of them embrace this opportunity to drive organizational change. In the fourth quarter last year, you know, after, you know, 9 months, 10 months of adjustment, in the fourth quarter last year, six families among the board members come together. They have a combined effort to organize a leadership training because they feel that, you know, to move forward for the new change, new direction, I need my team to be ready. And this is a good chance for me to talk about managing change. In the past, there were a lot of inertia, internal inertia, a lot of resistance, but this is a time when you talk about change, it's easy to convince the management team. So they put together, we run 2 programs. Each program, it's about 3 days. Of course, we have it's a hybrid. We have the, you know, online, we have Zoom coaching, we have 360, but we also do like, you know, face-to-face group discussion workshop. So total 160 people. We run into 2 workshops, 80 and 80, and it was very successful. And then, you know, they say that, you know, in the past, I've been talking about all this strategic change that I wanted to push, but, you know, the employees was difficult. So that was the time that they actually, it was easy for them to sell the idea across. Now, one of the important missions.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the
timing.
I'm told to be very strict on time, so.
Okay. 2 more slides, okay? Now, for that, you know, what they want to do is during this crisis is really to build the psychological capital so that you can move forward. So we did a lot of exercises and discussion to talk about all this. How do you build psychological capital within the company? That's and then the power of collectivism. You know, Chinese emphasize a lot of collectivist mindset and to put the group priority on top of individual. I think that works very well in this crisis. So these are the key lessons. Accelerating digital transformation led by the second gen, build psychological capital. The family and non-family members actually get together to discuss, leverage collectivism, and embrace the paradox mindset. Now, last point that I want to talk about, it's this from an either or choice to a both and exercise. You know, in the past, we always have to choose alternatives, but then now the alternatives are contradicting in conflict, but we have to balance the contradiction. So, shifting from the traditional mindset to a paradoxical mindset, the both and mindset, you need to do this, you need to do that. They contradict, but you need to manage that. So tolerate uncertainty, embrace dynamism. It's the way to go. All right, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Jendi. That was amazing, really, really good. And without further delay, we will shift to Joseph Fan. Can you put your video on? Joseph Fan is, as I said, the professor in family business in Chinese University of Hong Kong. He's probably the person who have researched most in family businesses across the world, and a very good and old friend of me. He's the co-author. We wrote a book together, The Family Business Map, 5-10 years ago. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. Joseph, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for Morten's invitation. This is probably the second time I participate the Wendel Center Family Business Day. The first time was like almost 10 years ago. Okay, time flies. The topic I'm going to share with you is governance and strategy for business resilience. Before I talk, I have to warn you that I am going to provide you a thinking framework to think about what is resilience and what are different ways to sustain our business through volatilities. So there won't be any observation from the field, but I personally think, based on our research and our observations in the past, the framework hopefully will be very helpful for family business to plan and to organize and to build sustainability for future possible volatility. So resilience, in my view, is business continuity subject to volatility. And this volatility could be internal, could be external. Of course, the pandemic we have been facing is an external shock that drastically affect the supply and demands of many sectors around the world. But we also have internal volatility caused by poor business decisions, stakeholder conflicts, and so on and so forth. So when I interpret resilience as a business continuity, I mean that in the future, family business will not only solve problems in recessions, but also prepare people and their organizations when they are in peaceful period. So that resilience is really about continuously strengthen the quality and also the effectiveness of collaboration of people subject to a governance system that guide their decision making. Next. So there are two typical types of business model that possibly could help business going through difficulties, volatility, both up and down. The first type of model is market-based. That is, we attempt to make quick factor adjustment. For example, in this pandemic, airlines, hotel, many consumer tourism, some company, especially in the West, United States in particular, maybe also Europe, they respond to the crisis by quickly laying off people, employees, workers, or even managers. They are able to do that because they have deep factor market. That is, the market for laborers and professional managers in more developed countries are much deeper than emerging market, enable them to adjust very quickly. But this is this may not be true in emerging market. Also, the market-based model will respond to volatility by adopting new technology and also quickly. The technology could potentially substitute the factor that is no longer advantageous. For example, some company may respond to the crisis by not only lay off, but also adopting technology so that in the future, they don't have to hire so many people. Another type of response is based on relationship. The relationship model do not emphasize quick vector adjustment, but emphasize the durability of relationship in contracts between owners and stakeholders. The durability is established through specialized or relationship-based investment on both the owner and the factor supplier's side. I'll quickly give you an example later, but let's see a graph to help you better understand what do I mean by relationship-based contracting. So we have a business owner and we are facing many stakeholders. So this stakeholder could be any stakeholder. Let's say employees, but on the other hand, it could be could be family members, founding family members, could be professional managers, could be supplier, customer, and so on. So this, for the sake of illustration, let's stick to employees. Next. So in the typical contract between owners and employees, we have wage, salary, indexed to profitability of the company or the growth of the industry, economic conditions. At the end, the price, the contract, the wage is going to be indexed to these several factors. Next. We also have a spot price, market wage. And market wage can change from time to time. Go above the contract wage, go below the contract wage. When they go above the contract wage, business owner will try to keep those employees, and employees want to go other place to work, to get a better salary. Reversely, when the red line is below the blue line, the business owner will try to cutting their salary, or will suffer from the higher than market wage as stipulated in the contract. And of course, the employee at this time will try their best to save their job. So we can see that the up and down of the spot price, the market wage around the contract wage is going to create, I mean, this is a type of volatility that is going to create a conflict between owners and employees. So in order to maintain a stable relationship, stable employment relationship in this contract, the contract will not only have price, wage, but also have other non-price dimension, enabling and inducing both workers and owners to make relationship-specific investment. Why is specific? Because it only creates value in this particular relationship, but not elsewhere, not outside the company. For example, I'm acquainted with a Japanese traditional confectionery manufacturer, Toraya. The company has almost 500 years of history. And their key product is their traditional confectionaries that require years of training and learning before a worker can comprehend. It is extremely difficult to train up a skillful traditional confectionery maker, and it will be extremely costly to lose this worker after they acquire the skill. Therefore, the employer, the owners, very interesting. The owner of Toraya, which is the 17th generation family member, told me that none of their family members know how to make traditional confectionery. So they need to do their best to protect, to convince their worker so that they are willing to learn the skill and stay in the company. So they make many, many small investment, so-called, to make their employee happy. For example, the current owner spent his entire career to make change in almost 20 employee welfare policies, little by little, over the past 3 decades. And also throughout the past several hundred years of turmoil, politically, economically, or earthquake, tsunami, the company never fired a worker. So the worker 100% almost trust the owner, and they are willing to learn and stay. They believe they won't be expropriated because one day if they are fired, they won't be able to find another job by that skill. So this is a very good example of relationship-based contracting to endure volatility. And also, please note that there's a self-enforcement range created by this relationship-specific investment on both sides. That is, although it will sustain volatility, but in extreme scenario, for example, when the spot price, the wage level go to a very high level or very low level outside the enforcement range, the contract will be breached. The relationship will be discontinued. So therefore, for company like Toraya, wishing to be sustainable on a long-term basis, they have to try their best to widen the range of self-enforcement by making specialized investment. And there are many other ways to invest in specific, to cultivate a doable relationship. If this stakeholder is a family member, then family governance and all the components in the governance mechanism will serve to expand the self-enforcement range. So generation after generations, family can collaborate, even in bad time, of course, also in good time. Next.
Joseph, we're short on time now. Sorry for being...
Okay, so the last page. Now, if you are able to practice, you could use the framework, the thinking framework that I have suggested to think about your own family business. What is your goal? What is your value? And strategy, as well as investment, other policies such as financing investment. For example, if you are in emerging market, your family business probably should have conservative capital structure, balancing your effective control and business growth. Control is important here because that's an important way to protect the specialized assets that have been invested by stakeholders and owners. You should avoid borrowing too much because you know that that overhang create all sort of conflict interest and volatility that is difficult to control. In terms of investment, in emerging market governed by relational contracting, it should be even more forward-looking than market-based model, staying focused, avoiding speculations and unrelated diversification because they increase volatility that may be difficult to control when they are outside the enforcement range. And your investment strategy should be conservative in normal periods. For example, making multiple small investment in one directions, instead in terms of one big investment, aggressively investment in unrelated area. And perhaps this will enable family business to make more active investment decision or business transformation in recession period, because this is typical of the time when unprepared competitors retreat, and so on and so forth. For the interest of time, I'm going to stop here. If you are willing to communicate with me, feel free. And Morten, we should write a book about this.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And I'm sorry for being the tough guy here on time. We still have a few minutes, and we are getting questions in from the audience. So if you have any urgent questions, please type them in the Q&A. We get two questions quite repeatedly, and these are big questions. Let's start with I think one of the most interesting questions at this point, given our audience today of multiple generations. You know, how does this crisis and resilience fit with the transition? I mean, we know that, you know, normally we talk about transition, it's very much about keeping family businesses across generations stable. Now we have a big crisis, which in one dimension break up, you know, all the transition planning family businesses have done the last couple of years because the world has changed in so few days. But on the other hand, gives opportunities. Gian, you started actually talking about this, but you know, many of our family business now are you know, doesn't know what it, you know, how to continue transition and succession. In mainland China, we're talking about the first to second generation. In the rest of Asia, we are talking about the fourth to fifth, as Joseph said, the 15th to the 16th generation. And in Europe, of course, we have all patterns also. Can you briefly comment on this? First, Professor Lee, and then Professor Fan.
I think well, it depends on whether you see this as a crisis, a challenge, or you see that as an opportunity. You know, one of the case studies that I wrote, it's about a Singapore family business. You know, they also, I mean, the case talk about the disruption in this succession process. You know, the second gen was supposed to take over, and then, so, I mean, to make it short, the first generation actually kind of lay back, but then sets the strategic parameters, meaning, you know, they they manage the strategic discussion. So in terms of the strategic direction, you know, the second gen will take over the I mean the first generation will need to seek approval from the first generation, but in terms of the operation, so this is actually a good chance to allow the young generations to be on the battlefield, but then also to have project-based, which means you cannot just throw everything, but then divide them into small tasks. Okay, for this employees safety, what do you do? For digital marketing, you know, then you lead another group. So it's a lot of task force for them to lead, so that they work with different people. You know, in that sense, they actually push the younger generations to take on more battles in the front line. But when it comes to the strategic decision, you know, it has to be managed at the board level. I think, you know.
Thank you very much. Joseph, let me address a second question to you. And I got a very simple question in the Q&A here. Where are we sitting? So maybe we should say this. We are actually spanning the world here. I'm sitting in Denmark, in Europe, and have a strong European bias. Professor Lee is sitting in Shanghai, as she said, in a quarantine hotel. And Joseph is sitting in Australia. So we are covering at least 12 hours time span here. One of the other questions I think, which is really interesting, is can we compare? Now we're talking about Europe and Asia today. What can we learn from Europe and Asia, Joseph? And let me just start out. One of the things that we see a lot in Europe is government policy. I mean, we have we are borrowing tons of money in all European countries to support businesses, and in particular in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, where I'm sitting, we have these furlough. So everybody who don't fire any people can get furlough compensation. Billions of dollars are giving out in compensation for keeping employees on job. In our research, one of the interesting studies the things we see is actually that family firms, if everything, they don't use the compensation policy as much as non-family firms, and they don't fire as many people. So one of the fascinating thing about family firms is actually that they seem to keep the labor even without the government support. So this is, for me, was a great observation. Now, Joseph, if you compare as an expert Europe and Asia, what can we learn from each other in this situation here? Easy question.
This is a good question. Actually, it tied nicely with the conceptual figures that I try to explain to our audience. Now, in Asia, especially those regions that are more familiar with China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and maybe some Southeast Asian countries, we typically adopt a low-cost model. For example, low wage. So we are affordable to keep more people, like it or not. If you want this job, this is so much. And this is very different from Europe. We have a low-cost, no-brand strategy. We only produce products for brand name, and we don't keep a brand. So it's a cost-down model. So therefore, and the cost-down model is not God-given or because we are Chinese, because of the institutional constraint, because our government typically do not look after their people as much as the more developed countries. And in fact, those who get resources are basically adopting a rent-seeking business model that you sort of try to get close to politicians and making them happy this way or another. In that way, you secure a resource to do your business. Really, to survive in this market, you have to be low cost, or you are politically connected. Those are the main model. Maybe cost sensitive is something that European company can learn.
It's true.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we are running out of time. Thank you very much, Professor Lee, Jian-Li, and I hope you will survive your 2 weeks in the hotel room. And thank you very much, Joseph, in Australia. That's the good thing about Zoom, that we can do these cross-world events for sure.
Bye-bye,
I give the word to Sonia.